We need to talk about how with the narrative of plastic pollution, advanced recycling has all of a sudden become positioned as a savior. But is it true? Is it more complicated? Is it just PR? Let's talk about it and break it down. And a big reason I'm talking about this with you today is that last month, the world's nations came together to do something that they've actually never done before. They began negotiations on the first ever international treaty to contain plastic pollution. Because not news, we've talked about this before, the earth is virtually flooded right now with plastic waste that's awful for the environment. I mean, we are producing 400 million metric tons more of this stuff every year. And at this UN meeting in Kenya, delegates were split over how exactly to address this growing problem. You had some pushing to reduce plastic production altogether, others wanting to merely dispose of plastic better. And a big thing here is that since the 1990s, the plastics industry has backed that second proposal. Just recycle it.
The bottle may look empty, yet it's anything but trash. It's full of potential. And at DuPont, we're making sure that the potential isn't thrown away.
But a hugely important data point, less than 10% of all the world's plastics are actually recycled, with most just getting incinerated, thrown into landfills, or dumped into the environment. And then even that fraction that is recycled, eventually that's got to be thrown out too because the quality of the plastic degrades with each use. Right, so in the face of all these disappointing results, in these past few years, the plastics industry has turned to a different method called chemical recycling, where unlike with the classic process, right, mechanical recycling, they simply chop plastic up, they instead melt it down and reuse it. Right, they dissolve the plastic into molecular elements, at which point it can then be turned back into fresh, high-quality plastic. And the process can even break down the most difficult products, right? Things that, at least by mechanical means, are written off as non-recyclable. So boom, we got the silver bullet, let's do a little dance. Except, not so fast. Turns out what works great in theory doesn't work so well in practice, with reports saying that most chemical recycling plants kind of just stop halfway through the process, right? So they break down the plastic into the original stuff that it was made from, fossil fuels, but then instead of turning it back into plastic, they just burn it. And that reportedly either done on-site or after being shipped to cement kilns and waste processors across the United States. Right? So the thing that everybody is assuming is helping clean up the environment, it's actually pumping more oil and gas fumes into it. I mean, it's not only emitting greenhouse gases that heat up our planet, but also it's putting out a whole array of toxic chemicals that endanger our health. With an investigation by the Natural Resources Defense Council finding that a single chemical recycling facility in Oregon, it produces nearly 500,000 pounds of benzene, lead, cadmium, and other hazardous waste per year. And you have another report by Beyond Plastics and the International Pollutants Elimination Network citing more scientific literature, finding emissions of persistent cancer-causing compounds from the chemical recycling facilities or their fuel products include dioxins, volatile organic compounds, and heavy metals. So unsurprisingly, chemical recycling's hardly put a dent into the giant fucking mountain of plastic polluting the earth, with the report also finding that for the 11 chemical recycling plants currently operating in the US, collectively, they have stated the ability to process less than 1.3% of the country's annual plastic waste. And that's their stated ability. Trust that as much as you trust a guy to tell you his actual height, because it's unclear whether they're actually operating at maximum capacity. For example, the Brightmark Energy facility in Ashley, Indiana, according to The Intercept, they're still operating in a test phase at 1/50th of its publicized capacity 4 years after breaking ground. And while you had that plant barely making it off the ground, Brightmark tried to build what would have been the nation's largest chemical recycling plant in Georgia in 2021, because he had Macon Bibb County saying, hey, we'll give you $500 million in tax-exempt bonds to finance the construction. All you gotta do is give us evidence that your plant in Indiana is actually making and selling product. But then, surprise, surprise, no evidence like that popped up, and the project was officially killed the following year. And you can boil it all down to one simple reason. It does not make economic sense. It was true in the 1970s, it is unfortunately still true today. Simply producing new plastic is cheaper, easier, and makes better products than sorting and recycling old plastic. And unless there is a big jump, some revolutionary change in the economics and technical feasibility of how this happens, it's probably gonna remain true for the future. And so then, one of the big questions here is, why does the plastics industry invest so much into this? And the answer, if you've watched the show for a while, is not gonna surprise you. There's two things that ultimately matter when it comes to power, control, running a business: money, and what we have here, PR. And primarily because good PR allows you to make more money. With a report from Beyond Plastic and IPEN concluding, just like mechanical recycling, chemical recycling is an industry marketing tactic to distract from the real solution to the plastic problem, reducing how much plastic is produced in the first place. And understand, I don't want you to get confused. This is not a conspiracy theory. In fact, NPR and PBS combed through internal industry documents and they interviewed former officials way back in 2020. And they concluded, we found that the industry sold the public on an idea it knew wouldn't work, that the majority of plastic could be and would be recycled, all while making billions of dollars selling the world new plastic. Right? And as they molded public opinion with TV ads like the ones that we saw before, company experts were literally telling them, we have serious doubts about whether this is feasible technically or economically. And even though we are talking about what we're talking about today, you can bet that we are going to see even more of those ad campaigns in the coming decades. Right? Because as the shift toward renewable energy shrinks demand for fossil fuels, you have oil and gas companies telling their shareholders the future is plastic. So to undercut concerns about plastic waste, you have lobbying groups like the American Chemistry Council, which includes firms like ExxonMobil, Dow, and DuPont, helping to pass laws in at least 24 states reclassifying chemical recycling as manufacturing rather than waste disposal. And that's a really important thing because it subjects their facilities to less stringent environmental regulations. And the industry has also secured public subsidies in the form of federal grants, state tax abatements, low-interest green bonds, or government loan guarantees for 5 of the 11 plants, which also means that taxpayers are essentially doing petrochemical giants PR for them. But with that said, that is where this edition of Ways Corporate America is literally killing us all will end today. But also, we're going to be kind of diving into a different aspect of this in the relatively near future, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel.